Hello, and welcome to the Dragon's Library. My name's Davis, and you can just call me the Dragon. This is going to be a show where I talk about different pieces of media that I find interesting. Might decide to review them, might just talk about certain aspects of them I find fun, but you'll usually get two different pieces, either a book, video game, movie, TV show, anything like that. Those are the ones I'm going to be sticking on mostly. Occasionally you might get just one of those and some other topic that I find interesting. Those can vary. And most of the time you'll just get two of them. So I think we should get started, and I think that's the introductions. Yeah. Alright. The two things we're going to be talking about today are His Majesty's Dragon, a book by Naomi Novik, and a video game by Nintendo called Kirby Air Ride. So I hope you have fun with it. And let's get started. Alright, so let's get started with His Majesty's Dragon. This is a book I read. I actually can't remember when I first read it, but I recently started going back to it, and I went through the whole series. I listened to it on audiobook, so, released the rest of the series I did. The first book I actually read the paperback version. I think I have a copy of it. I have a copy right here in my bookshelf. So, His Majesty's Dragon is about a naval captain, Will Lawrence, in the Napoleonic Wars. And in this timeline, dragons exist, and they've existed throughout history. England has a aerial corps made up of dragons and their captains, humans that dragons bond to after they first hatch from the shell. It's sort of an instinctual bond, so it's something they would usually make with dragons in the wild, but in closer things, they basically think of the humans they bond to as their human. So it's almost more of a dragon guarding its treasure thing, which is just so amazing. I love it. So basically, the Aero Corps is looked down upon as being like this really informal, not necessarily a good place to end up. It's respected, but in the same way you'd respect like a spy. They do something that's not really necessarily looked on as something everyone should be doing. If that makes sense. So the Aero Corps is very informal, and Will is this formal naval captain who captures a ship, a French ship. This is the Napoleonic War, so they're at war at the moment. And on board is Temeraire's egg. Temeraire is the name of the dragon. Will gives him that name after he hatches, and he's the only human Temeraire wants to talk to, which means that he's the only human, which means he ends up becoming Temeraire's captain. It's really wonderful reading about them. Like, one of the things that I really enjoyed about the book was the relationship between Will and Temeraire. The two of them together just had this wonderful bond, because Lawrence was raised as this really stiff, formal naval captain who has a sort of noble-ish father. Like, you get the idea that he's not super rich, but by English standards, but he's like amongst the nobility-ish, if that makes sense. But he's like the third son, and he was going to be just a regular naval captain. He was going to earn his keep and marry this girl back home. But complications make marriage really hard for aerial officers, so she ends up marrying someone else shortly through the book. They have a little scene, and he basically just says, yes, this is my responsibility, and I move on. And so Temeraire becomes his focus. And they're just really sweet together. Lawrence is this like really caring parental figure in the first book. You get the feeling that he didn't want any of this, but by the end of the book, you also get the feeling that he wouldn't trade it for the world. In fact, he's even given a chance where he can give it away. Shortly after they make landfall, the aerial command wants to try and replace Lawrence with an aerial officer, someone who will actually know what they're doing, which Lawrence accepts, but he's very sad because he's grown so attached to Temeraire over the last few weeks they've been on the ship together. They were heading back to England. And he's really frustrated that he can't seem to move on. Like, he accepts it's what's probably best for Temeraire and that he should, have a naval captain as his captain, but he doesn't really want to. And so that's how it is for a while, but eventually they get back to him. And so in the middle of the night, a courier comes and says that Temeraire has gone really violent and he won't take him. And you find out that they basically treat this situation, this is something that's come up before. So what they do is they try and act like the rider's captain has died and they won't be coming back, and they try and convince the dragon, who's still really young, to try and accept a different captain. But Temeraire doesn't want anyone else. It doesn't help that the one who did it, Dyer, I think his name was, he tries to lie and say Lawrence didn't want Temeraire. He ruined his life and he doesn't want him, and he threw him away, when Lawrence was really trying to do what was best for him. So Temeraire gets really upset, and Lawrence is the only one who can calm him down. So they decide, yep, you're a captain now. But later that night, Temeraire even says to Lawrence, look, if you really miss your ship, if you really miss being a captain, you can go back to that. I won't accept that other guy because he lied to me. But if you want to go back to your life, if you have a life that you want to go back to, I will find someone else. I will do that for you. And you have this moment where he can just say no. He can just go back to his life. Heck, the Admiralty is literally willing to just give him his ship back. No problems. Everything can just move on, just like it was before Temeraire showed up. But in the few weeks, you get the feeling that Lawrence has really become almost like a father figure to him. And it's this really intimate bond. As Temeraire's training progresses, Lawrence has to learn to be a captain. Temeraire begins to question, hey, why can't dragons, go to the shops and stuff like that? I love reading, but why can't I go buy my own books? And things like that. So it's setting up this whole, dragon rights thing that happens later in the series. And you meet a few other dragons. So Temeraire gets put on a formation with a longwing. In this series, it's a type of dragon with really big wings, and the reason they're so important is that they spit acid. Now, this is one of Naomi Novik's really cool additions, is that she gives all the dragons, these quirks. You get the feeling they're very, very different breeds in a species. So, for example, longwings are one of the most feared England dragons because they can spit this really corrosive acid. However, they couldn't tame them. They lost them by the dozens out of the shell. They just wouldn't accept any captain for years until one of the queen's, I think it was attendants or something, accidentally was there or something. They didn't really explain it, but she eventually got put up as the captain to a longwing. And they found out, they just like girls more than boys. A lot more. To the point where basically every longwing captain is a girl. So you have Jane Harcourt. And since this is, Napoleonic England, that's not exactly appropriate by their standards. So you have this whole thing where Lawrence has this, culture shock. I love it. It's basically circumstances forced them to do this. And as a result, the Aerial Corps is actually kind of progressive-ish. It's still, that era England. But, they're remarkably casual and upfront about it. But they keep secrets that there are dragons who are, without handlers, who train others, who act as, flight trainers, and stuff like that, because they are afraid people won't get it. They'll overreact. And the whole women being longwing captains, it's a whole military secret. So you're not supposed to tell anyone. If somebody finds out, you're supposed to make sure they stay quiet. And it's sort of this big open secret in the military amongst the higher naval officers and the entire Aerial Corps that, yeah, every longwing captain is a woman. And it's really funny, too, the way he acts at first. At first he's trying to be, prim and proper and, this is, a lady. But eventually he's just Captain Harcourt, we need to do this. And he doesn't, fully change. He still has moments where he acts, chivalrous-ish. I'm not really sure what the appropriate behavior is, but it's really funny. Captain Harcourt is just kind of blunt, and you get the feeling that she really just, she just doesn't have time for that. Lily is a lot of fun too. She's really sweet. There's actually a whole scene where Harcourt gets kidnapped, and you get just the way Naomi wrote her. You get the feeling that Lily wants nothing more than to just melt the person who did it. So she's a great does a great job with all the dragons. There's also Maximus, who's a giant regal copper. They're like the big dragons, the big, strong, tough ones. And his Captain Berkeley, who's sort of Lawrence's, I don't want to say like best friend, because Temeraire kind of fits that description, but like his aviary friend. Like the first, his closest friend amongst the aviators, if that makes sense. And Maximus is kind of this, like, not gonna say dull, because he's bright. He's actually pretty intelligent at times, but he's just kind of lazy. Yeah, lazy. So the Eurocopters are just these big, giant dragons, and he's kind of lazy, but also at the same time, you get the feeling that even though he wants nothing to do with all these other dragons, running around being, super excited about random stuff, he just always tags along. Honestly, he kind of reminds me of myself. Like, this dragon who wants to show you that he just doesn't care, but the second you actually talk about something, he's actually engaging a lot more than his attitude would lead you to believe. I don't know, maybe that was just me. Maybe I was just identifying with this random dragon for no reason. And of course you have Temeraire, who is really curious and interested, and the whole thing is just this kind of sweet, almost just a story about William and Lawrence. The first book deals with Napoleon trying to cross the English Channel, and about one other major action beat. So at the end of the book, they have Napoleon trying to he's basically led the naval fleet away, because, fun fact to history that I looked up about this too, to verify it, Napoleon was garbage when it came to Navy. He was really good at ground forces, though. So Britain had a much better Navy, and that's how they were able to stop him, both in our timeline and in theirs. So what Napoleon did was he diverted Britain's Navy away to massive naval battles, which he lost. But he had been he had built these basically really cheap ships made of really light wood that could carry thousands of soldiers, and had dragons carrying them, like a few dozen dragons just carrying them across the channel. And so they only find out about the last minute, and they have to recall as many of their forces as they can, but most of them aren't at the battle. And of course, they do end up stopping that particular attempt. There are two other action points. First one is when they're trying to bring back a dragon who's wounded. It's not really an action in the sense of like fighting, but it's the action of, they're flying, it's urgent, people, get in trouble, and there's danger. So it's this giant, first thing they do is they, they're training, and they get word that a big dragon has been heavily wounded and needs to make it to their coven. But if he doesn't make it, he won't be able to get treatment, and he's not going to be able to support himself. So there are tons of dragons keeping him in the air, and they need, new dragons to come relieve them and help bring him all the way there. And so Temeraire and his, group of dragons, Formation. Yeah, Formation. With Lily at the head, they go back to, help him. So Maximus and Temeraire go. And there's this whole thing where, he's clawing at Temeraire because he's in pain. He's like, heavily wounded, and he doesn't really know what he's doing. He accidentally claws Temeraire. Lawrence almost gets thrown off, but he and Temeraire bring him back. The other one would probably be, it's like a little bit less of an action beat and more of a suspense, if that makes sense. There's and spoiler alert. No spoiler alert. Your Napoleon thing was already enough of a spoiler alert, but so there's this traitor, I won't say who. He takes Captain Harcourt prisoner, and he tries to bring them to France. I'm not going to explain the reasoning, but basically, he's holding her captive, and it really displays one of the things that's really interesting, that because Naomi Novik really knows how to inject life into her world. These dragons, they have weaknesses that have been studied, psychological ones, not just physical ones. For example, dragons with bonded captains would rather be captured than let their captain die. So, in a fight between dragons, what's most effective is a boarding party jumps on the dragon, hooks into like the leather harnesses they use, and will go up on the dragon, and either using a gun, a sword, or even just like anything they have available, they'll take the dragon's captain prisoner. And once that happens, they can force the dragon to land, because the dragon would rather stop fighting than lose their captain. So this traitor uses Harcourt to try and bring Lily over to France as sort of a well, it's really complicated, and I'm not going to explain the reasoning anyway. So the whole thing is basically just them trying to stop it, and Lawrence has to save her. It's really tense, and more of a human-on-human action than dragon-on-dragon. Which is something I really liked, is that both Lawrence and Temeraire get moments to shine. In fact, amongst the two of them, Temeraire, it might very well be the smarter one. Like, he's the brains of his formation. He gets bored doing the same maneuvers over and over again, and so he decides to invent his own. And the trainer is so impressed that he says, let's try some out. So yeah, the whole book is just steeped in the era it's set in. And it's a really interesting, really unique fantasy story that I think more people should give a shot. I'll go ahead and include a link to it in the description, wherever you're watching this. And yes, definitely check it out. You can get it on Amazon, your local bookstore. I actually work at a Barnes & Noble, so come by us. And yeah, you can also listen to it on Audible if you don't have the time to read things. But seriously, if you like dragons, if you like Napoleonic history, if you like fantasy, if you like just alternate history in general, I think it's a really interesting read and well deserving of way more attention than it wants. And there's a whole series. It's a really long series, and it is finished now, so you can read the whole thing altogether. Okay, well, I think that's all my thoughts currently on His Majesty's Dragon. We might come back to the series later with the later books if you guys are interested in hearing my thoughts on those. So let's move on to the next topic of discussion. The next is a video game that I played as a kid. It's called Kirby Air Ride. Kirby Air Ride is a kart racing spin-off from the Kirby video game franchise. It's a series on by Nintendo. Most of you probably know who I'm talking about. It's the, pink puffball of Nintendo, the one who, eats things and then gets the power of whoever he ate. If you don't know him from either this game or his own series, you definitely know him from Smash Brothers. Because, let's be real here, we all know him from Smash Brothers. I kid, because I actually learned about him from the kart racing spinoff. It was one of the first video games I played on the GameCube. I played it at a friend's house when I was like 8. And, wow, that makes me feel old. And I actually only played that game of his. I actually haven't played any of the other Kirby games, but I love me some Kirby Air Ride. So the game is basically just a kart racing spinoff, and the whole thing is that it's set in Kirby's world. There are a few modes. There's the basic racing mode. There's a top-down racing mode, which I've always found the controls just a pain. But I do enjoy it, just because it's a bit of a challenge nowadays. And it's grown on me over the years. Did not like it that much as a kid, though, I will tell you that. I never played it as a kid after the first time. Nowadays, I play it a bit more. And then there's the... I will say, the crown jewel, the best part of the game is City Trial, and I love City Trial. So the idea is, it's basically all the players start out in this big city. And this isn't a race or anything. So the city has a 3 to 7 minute timer, depending on the settings. I always play on 7 minute because it gives you the best experience. And the city is full of power-ups, so you can, become Fire Kirby or whatever. It's full of boxes that can contain different things, food items to heal, random temporary bonuses, power-ups, and also stat boost items. And the goal of the City Trial mode is basically to collect stat boost items and find a better ride. These rides are randomly distributed across the city. There are lots of secrets to find. And throughout the course of the City Trial, throughout the course of the whole 3 to 7 minutes, you'll get somewhere between 1 to 3 events. And these are just random environmental things. All the railways are set on fire. Meteors fall from the sky. A giant bird appears, and you can hit its head for items to make it go away. A thief has stolen some items and is hiding somewhere in the map. Stuff like this. All the items are the same. There are a lot of them. And they make each playthrough kind of unique, so it doesn't get as boring, basically. Some of them are kind of useless, like these lighthouse that just heals your ride if you stand in the beams of light, but they make it so that every event doesn't automatically interrupt the game, which, in a weird way, is kind of helping towards the event's purpose. Alright, well, I'm getting off topic here. So, I've talked about the events, and that's basically the idea. So, after the 3 to 7 minutes, you will have your ride and whatever stat boosting items you've got. And you will then have those in the challenge. At the end of that's the end of the round. Now, occasionally one of the events is you'll get a hint to what the round is going to be. They're really accurate, I think. From what I remember, they're usually correct. I think occasionally they are, but I might be remembering that wrong. Anyway, so the events can be anything from a targeted gliding competition where you have to aim your star, because that's what all the rides are. They're stars, basically. All these different stars that handle differently. Some of them glide well, some of them are really fast, some of them have a really high top speed, or average, below average, everything else. One of them's really fast and has okay glide, but it can't turn. It can only stop and then turn. So your ride can drastically affect how you do in different events. And some rides are just going to fail certain events. That's just the nature of the beast. But all in all, I think the events are fairly well balanced for most rides. And at the end of the event, whoever won the race or got the most points in the gliding competition or killed the most enemies in the destruction derby or whatever, they win. And there's no story mode to this, unfortunately. I do wish there was a story mode, mostly because I just think it would be amazing. But there are lots of different challenges and hidden things you can find. It's a great game to play with friends. The computer is actually really good at the game. They're very good at collecting the stat boosting items, so they tend to be an actual challenge at the end of the round, which I really like. Nowadays, they're not much of a challenge to me, even at the highest level, because I've been playing it since I was like 8. But, to a new player, they can be challenging. Anyway, the fun thing about the game for me was that it's so unique. Like, most kart racing spin-offs don't have a unique game mode for the kart racing spin-off. They're just, a racing. But Kirby, it had a racing mode. It had a flat racing mode, and all those tracks can be challenged at the end of City Trial. But City Trial was more like a Destruction Derby meets RPG grinding meets training montage almost. It's almost bizarre. And you can go at the game in a lot of different ways. So there are a few different objectives you can go after each game. In the city, you can find stat boosting items, obviously. You can focus on those. You can look for a ride. One of the interesting things is if you get off your ride, so in the distance, when you get close to a ride, you'll see a little icon appear over it. And over time, you'll learn. You're in a free run mode where you can test out all the rides and stuff like that. And you'll learn which rides are best for different things. They all seem to have different strengths. Like, I don't really think many of them are flat out useless. There are just a few playstyles I prefer. I think most of them could be useful given the right way, and I've seen the comms turn basically any ride into a monster with the right stat boosting items. So, anyway though, the objectives are basically, hey, you can either improve your own ride, you can sabotage your opponent, so, destroy their ride and force them to, wander around as Kirby, which is really, really slow, and find a new one. Now, there are a decent number of rides. They're probably going to find something unless they just run out of time or they're in a really bad area. But they'll be able to see rides from a really long way off. In fact, one of the first things a lot of people will do in a game is hop off their starting ride, which everybody starts with the same basic star. And they'll float around and look around, because as Kirby, when you're off your ride, you see from a much larger direction, and so it gives you a good idea of what rides are in the area. So the way I usually play is that I'll hop on a ride, I'll hop off my ride, look for something in the area. If I don't see anything that meets the playstyle I usually go for, which is stat boosting with a minor sabotage, I'll hop back on my ride and just go look for items. And if not, I do see a ride I like, usually the gliding Shadow Star. I love it. I used to call it Batty as a kid because it's shaped like a bat. I know, I'm a geek. So you go around the area. But I like that it gives you the option. Like, it is totally possible to play Kirby Air Ride City Trial as a Destruction Derby sabotage mode. Like, not collect many items aside from the handful you find on the way, but actively hunting down your opponents and trying to destroy your rides is a valid playstyle. And it can be really hard to avoid someone who's actively gunning for you sometimes. Like, you might have to actually just stop what you're doing and fight them, which can waste time. Now, there's a third playstyle that's sort of not really a consistent playstyle because it's not a guaranteed one. It's called Searching for the Pieces, or at least that's what me and my friends always call it. And the pieces are pieces of, they're two legendary rides. One of them's really good at flying, and one of them's has really high offense and really good speed. They're called Hydra. Let's see here. The flying one is Dragoon. So you've seen that one in Smash Brothers. So have you ever seen those pieces of Dragoon in Smash Brothers Brawl where you have to collect all of the random pieces and then you'll hop on something and a little targeting reticle will come up and you'll swoop by and knock them out of the stage? That's Dragoon. It's a really fast, really good glide ride that's meant for like flying around. It's so good at taking off that like you'll just hit a bump and you'll be flying in the air, zooming around. Like it's not gliding anymore. You're just outright flying. And the other is Hydra. And Hydra is a really fast ride that's shaped almost like a star with two giant turbines that are shaped like thorny plants. And it has a really, really long charge time, which means it can't move unless it's charged up So in charging Kirby Air Ride, it's basically like holding down, you stop moving, you charge up energy, and then you get a boost when you launch off, depending on how long you've charged. Now, most rides can move even when they're not charged, but Hydra can't. Most rides also eat up that charge meter really quickly. What Hydra does is you have to charge down, charge it up, and then it'll use up that charge to move. If you fully charge it, it's just going to go forever, basically. Like, you're never going to charge that thing again once you fully charge it, really. It can just go basically infinite and it has really high speed. Now, if you get, like, bumped or staggered or whatever, you can sometimes have to charge again. So a lot of people will go after charge stat boost items to balance it out. But the end result is pretty simple. And what going for the pieces means is that there are certain boxes you can break open and find items in. And the red boxes can contain the pieces to legendary rides. But they're only in certain areas. You learn what areas you are playing the game. So, like, there are a few areas where where it might be a piece. Like, if you see a red box there, hey, this might contain a piece, you should maybe break it open. And then there are a handful of areas that red boxes only appear very rarely in. The plains with all the stone huts, the waterfall, the water wheel area, and some of the hidden underground sections. And if a box appears there, it's almost guaranteed to be a piece. Like, not for all of the hidden underground sections, but like two specific ones. And if it's in either of those two specific hidden underground sections, the water wheel, or in the plains area, it's going to be a piece, flat out. There's no other chance. So, and once somebody has a piece, it can be knocked out and they're hit by someone, just like you can knock out stat boosting items, which is another benefit to the offensive player. You know, you might let somebody collect all but one of the pieces, then you find the last one and hunt them down for it, or they hunt you down for it. And I think it stops the legendary rides from being overpowered, because all you've got to do to stop somebody from getting one is steal a piece and then just avoid them the whole game and they'll never get it. Like, it can be really hard to get a piece from someone who's actively trying to avoid you. And it can lead to just these massive wars. Like, when you have 4 players, this game can get really chaotic and really fun. Like, you can have sedate games where everybody just does their thing, but other games you can just have open warfare, and it's just chaotic, fast-paced fun. Yeah, it was just one of my childhood games. I've talked with this game about a few people, because I always felt like this was the game nobody heard of growing up. And as I got older, I found out, oh yeah, there are a lot of other people who had a GameCube that loved this game. Because, of course they did. Because it's an amazing game, and Nintendo should totally make another one. So yeah. Those are just 2 of my favorite games. Those are just 2 things I love to talk about, I mean. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I highly recommend both Kirby Air Ride and His Majesty's Dragon. If you're a book lover, seriously, read His Majesty's Dragon. It is an amazing series, and not enough people talk about it. And if you like it, and read the rest of the series, Naomi Novik has actually continued writing. I'm going to be reading her book, Uprooted, soon. And if I like it, well, I might play it on the show. So, yeah. That's it. I hope you enjoyed your visit to the Dragon's Library.